Thank you very much, the chair, for all the introductions. And the theme of my presentation is Ufwiti in Northern Malawi facing the pastoral challenge. In Northern Malawi, the Tumbuka term Ufwiti, usually translated in English as witchcraft, refers to a complex of beliefs about the reality and existence of witchcraft, that people can tap energy or spiritual forces from the universe that can be used for assisting and harming their communities. Different scholars have debated about the reality and existence of witchcraft in African communities. Scholars from the areas of anthropology, philosophy, and theology have studied the phenomenon based on ethnographic studies conducted among different African societies and have established valid positions on witchcraft. These positions can be narrowed down to two main types. The first one is that witchcraft spiritual forces are real and exist. The second one is that the witchcraft spiritual forces are not real and does not exist. These two positions on witchcraft have created a long-running discussion about the reality, existence, and manifestation of witchcraft within African communities. The study of witchcraft emerged when Christian missionaries, early explorers, and the colonial government officials came to Africa. Morris explained that missionaries, explorers, and the colonial government officials, in order to understand African religious culture, situating it within its socio-historical context, and dealing with the challenges of governance in Africa, prompted them to seek assistance of ethnographers and anthropologists to study African traditional religion. Although witchcraft was usually seen as a distinct religion, nevertheless it forms a constituent part of African religious culture. One of the earliest leaders of the missionary instituted churches in Northern Malawi, the Church of Central Africa Presbyterian, CCP Synod of Livingstonia, struggled to develop any serious theological response to issues of witchcraft. However, they were aware of it, as Robert Laws, who wrote an article published in the Daily Free Press in 1877, that the people here have a great belief in witchcraft. In order to define and find out more about witchcraft, anthropologists and ethnographers embarked on the research on witchcraft, and according to Samuel Lume, the following anthropologists and ethnographers played a leading role: Wilson, Middleton, Markwick, Max Gluckman, Iward Shorter, Geoffrey Parinda, and Edward Evans Pritchard. They established that neither witchcraft nor witches have real spiritual forces, and they viewed witchcraft as a phenomenon used to maintain social order in a small-scale society. This fact prompted African scholars such as John Mbiti, Bulaja Ido, Laurent Magesa, Elias Kifoni Bogba, Masoane J. Manala, and Clement Majawa to re-examine African traditional religious philosophical thoughts and redefine the concept of witchcraft. African scholars have challenged the reductionist Western understanding. Manala has said that he is convinced that witchcraft is not imaginary nor unreal. It is still a strong force in Africa. Likewise, John Mbiti affirmed that the belief in functions of witchcraft is deeply rooted in African life in spite of modern education and religions. This gives an indication that most Africans do not need special orientation to believe that witchcraft exists. The fact is that witchcraft cannot be separated from the people of Africa. This can be evidenced by the fact that many Africans have been converted to Christianity, exposed to Western scientific knowledge, but witchcraft tendencies have remained a major phenomenon to them, even among urban, well-educated people. The reality and existence of witchcraft has recently received attention from several theological scholars, including Clement Majawa, Elijah Valoi, and Timothy Nyasuru. As Majawa explains, witchcraft is a complex reality, and many people are aware of its existence, but few know about its nature, strength, and limitations in the society. He maintains that many Christians are ignorant, doubtful, fearful, and in dilemma in regard to the reality of witchcraft beliefs and practices. Although churches condemn witchcraft and sometimes teach that its spiritual forces are not real and does not exist, nevertheless, in terms of pain, sickness, suffering, fear, insecurity, poverty, and death, many people consult witch doctors for answers. For Majawa, witchcraft is part of demonological narratives and form of evil spirits that can be expelled by priests and pastors through the ministry of exorcism in Africa. Majawa admitted the reality and the existence of witchcraft because the Bible, which is the word of God and the principal source of revelation, acknowledges the practice of witchcraft. Majawa further supported his argument by narrating that the belief and practices of witchcraft have existed since our culture. In our cultures since creation, and the Israelites acknowledged this practice. God commanded the Israelites that all those who practice witchcraft should be eliminated. That is Exodus 22 verse 18. Majawa concluded that since there are many biblical references to the phenomenon of witchcraft and its position clearly repudiates witchcraft, it therefore presupposes recognition of the reality and existence of witchcraft belief and practices. Likewise, Timothy Nyasuru believed that witchcraft is real and exists because the Bible, as the supreme rule of Christian faith, recognizes and accepts the existence and reality of witchcraft. In this respect, to say that witchcraft spiritual forces are not real and does not exist contradict the teaching of the Bible. The scholarly discussions of Majawa, Nyasuru, and several African scholars have not drawn their conclusion about the reality and the existence of witchcraft from scientific evidences or proofs, but from interpretation of the Bible. Scientifically, their arguments about the reality and the existence of witchcraft might be hard to prove. Additionally, the Bible usage of the word witchcraft in English has been translated to different languages with slightly different meanings in relation to its contemporary cultural context interpretation. Therefore, it is difficult to uphold their claims that witchcraft is real and exists in the African communities, because the arguments cannot be proved scientifically. Furthermore, No one has come out to display the acts of witchcraft, so they depend on hearsay about the existence of witchcraft. However, the persistent occurrence of issues related to witchcraft since the inception of Christianity suggests that the arguments of such scholars as Majawa and Nyasuru cannot easily be dismissed, but need to be taken seriously in the process of dealing with witchcraft beliefs and practices in Northern Malawi, the country of Malawi, and the whole continent of Africa. In contrast to Nyasuru, early anthropologists like Evans Pritchard, Palinda, Gluckman, and Morris viewed witchcraft as a phenomenon exists with no spiritual reality behind its claim. In their view, witchcraft beliefs and practices are pure framed in the immanent empirically. It is a phenomenon used to maintain social order within the African communities. Witchcraft has been used as a technique to explain misfortunes, calamities, crises, unexplained death, and the way of addressing interpersonal conflict, airing grievances, and restoring social relations within the African societies. On this view, Palinda has explained that the belief in witchcraft provides an outlet for repressed hostility, frustration, and anxiety. The fact that witchcraft gives an explanation, whether justified or unjustified, gives a psychological release to the people. There could be at least some reasons why anthropologists tend to the view that witchcraft spiritual forces are not real and does not exist. Elias Bugoba suggested that the reality and existence of witchcraft does not fit their view of rationality, and it was just a way of normalizing terminologies. Witchcraft beliefs and practices present an escape from human limitations, uncertainties, frustrations, and pain. Nonetheless, these anthropologists who concluded that witchcraft is not real and does not exist reached their conclusions based on evidence gathered during ethnographic studies. The Witchcraft Act, Chapter 7, Article 2 of Malawi Republican Constitution reflects the view held by the anthropologists, which say it is illegal to accuse someone of witchcraft or to hire witch doctor to identify an alleged witch. However, it remains a question why the influence of modernity, Christianity, and Islamic faith have failed to address this phenomenon once and for all. Regardless of lack of scientific empirical verification, the phenomenon continues to be deeply rooted in the minds and psyche of the African people, which suggests that it remains real in the lived experience of the people. This allows some anthropological researchers and European missionaries to argue that witchcraft spiritual forces are not real and does not exist, but it's just a matter of superstitious beliefs. Witchcraft is understood as the manner in which Africans apprehend the world and interpret all unforeseen circumstances. This has been part of the African narratives of life and remains the lens through which people read the event of their lives. The phenomenon is grounded in the concept of accusation as a principle for explaining all misfortune deemed to be caused by some unforeseen powers. As Roderick suggested, witchcraft provides a paradigm for understanding a certain kind of cultural behavior. Regardless of theoretical debate about the spiritual forces' existence and non-existence of witchcraft, it continues to be indeed experienced as a reality in African communities. Both theologians and anthropologists agree the fact that truly witchcraft exists in Malawi, but differed in its justification. The fact that the existence and reality of witchcraft belief is accepted and believed by many people worldwide. This section will focus on how different Christian churches have responded pastorally to the concern related to witchcraft beliefs and practices. Churches have been categorized according to their streams of Christian beliefs on matters related to witchcraft belief and practices and their confession of faith. These churches have been arranged in three streams. First, churches founded by classical missionaries that are mainline churches. Secondly, Pentecostal and charismatic churches. And thirdly, African independent churches or African instituted churches. The mainline missionary churches. Churches founded and planted by classical missionaries have typically seen witchcraft simply as superstition, with no spiritual forces, has no impact and consequences for the Christian community. This position was driven by the missionaries' modernist worldview, which failed to appreciate African sensibilities, ignoring and trivializing what were in fact real concerns about witchcraft relationship to and impact on the gospel. Soko supports Vandami on this point, adding that the missionaries' modernist worldview assumed the witchcraft would gradually disappear as Africans became properly educated. With this modernist approach, historian Elizabeth points out that Western missionaries simply denied the existence of spiritual forces in the belief of witchcraft rather than appropriating strong biblical resources regarding class power over evil powers. This denial approach proved to be ineffective as missionary churches attempted to minister to African converts. These churches had no helpful response when African Christians sought deliverance from evil spirits and curses. The new converts were puzzled when the church had no tangible solution for this pressing and widespread need. Clement Majawa argues that the Western missionary church's inability to engage with African perspective on witchcraft affected its churches with spiritual malaise, with faith mingled with a lack of hope and liberation, and the churches failing to address the role of divine power in the church and the society at large. This failure to deal with witchcraft directly resulted into the missionary churches' inability to let the gospel truly penetrate in the lives of their converts. As Africans, Christians continue to seek assistance from witch doctors to deal with their concerns. Their assumption that the practice of witchcraft would diminish as education increased proved to be illusory. Despite the massive growth of Christianity and Western education in Africa, witchcraft remained an enduring and pervasive element of African life in the 20th in the 21st century. Silas and Josana viewed that the missionary church failed to take the African convent seriously, neither recognizing the depth of the traditional African worldview, nor addressing their expressed pastoral concerns connected with witchcraft issues. This inability to take seriously the indigenous African worldview led many Africans to conclude that Jesus Christ was essentially foreign to their culture, and that Christianity was simply a Western phenomenon with little relevance to their lives. The mainline missionary churches chose to ignore the importance of witchcraft in the worldview and life experience of their African converts, failing to meet a significant pastoral need. Pentecostal and charismatic churches. Van Damme explained that while Western mainland churches ignored the spiritual reality of witchcraft and supernatural powers, Pentecostal and charismatic churches tend to take issues of witchcraft beliefs and practice seriously. Pentecostal and charismatic churches attributed supernatural powers to demons and saw witchcraft and magic as the work of demons. Like Van Damme, Majawa argues that Pentecostals and charismatic churches believe that demons use mythical powers to foretell an unpleasant and frightening future, or very bad news which happens as a punishment. Witchcraft is used to manipulate and control the victim. Pentecostal and charismatic churches have pastorally responded to issues related to witchcraft belief and practice by developing a demonology doctrine. Majawa described demonology doctrine as a belief that the devil can exert influence on individuals, communities, through the evil spirits called demons. Consequently, suggested Majawa, demonology has been skillfully woven with the doctrine of evil by using African philosophy. In this theology of demonology, Satan is the head of all evil forces, who have powers and constantly struggles with God over the dominion of the world and lives of the human beings. Witchcraft practitioners and demons as messengers of the devil are everywhere and responsible for all illnesses, disease, misfortune, immorality, and anything that human experience and inimical to their well-being. Pentecostals and charismatic churches teach that to overcome witchcraft and other superstitious beliefs, people need to be saved and delivered by our Lord Jesus Christ. In this respect, Majawa described salvation in Pentecostal and charismatic theology as a form of struggle with evil forces for healing, deliverance, and prosperity in the life of the believer. Majawa explained further that salvation in Jesus Christ also includes the commanding of prosperity and an inherent light of the believer, which the Holy Spirit gives to the believer. Pentecostal and charismatic churches pastorally developed a practice of deliverance from witchcraft and the devil. People who were affected by witchcraft are prayed for during the ministry of exorcism. Similarly, Josana argues that when exorcism is done in the Christian context, people are helped to trust in the supreme Spirit of God, and at the same time they are helped to understand pastorally the power contained in the Christian faith. The victims of witchcraft and demons are freed by the adjurations addressed to the devil through Jesus Christ to force him to vacate the place and abandon the situation. In these exorcism sessions, witchcraft material such as charms, fetish, witchcraft paraphernalia are surrendered and banned. Pentecostal and charismatic pastoral responses have been a more relevant to African Christian convert than modernist response of mainline churches. The Pentecostal and charismatic churches affirmed the spiritual reality of witchcraft, beliefs, and practices in Africa. In response to deal with the witchcraft problem, Pentecostal and charismatic churches taught and demonstrated the delivering power of Jesus Christ through prayers and exorcism. Most churches in all parts of Africa have included exorcism activities to provide pastoral help to their members. Failure to offer such pastoral services means losing members to churches that provide such spiritual assistance to their members. African Independent Churches or African Instituted Churches, AICs. The pastoral response of the African Independent Churches toward its members on witchcraft is done by mixing Christianity and African traditional beliefs. Witch doctors are used to give protection to their members by using concoctions and prayers to stop witches from harming members in some of these churches. African Independent Churches pray for their members who are afflicted with issues related to witchcraft beliefs and practices, so as to tender pastoral care. Sometimes African Independent Churches advise their members to consult witch doctors for quick solutions when prayers seem not to work, to maintain their traditional way of dealing with witchcraft. Soko has concluded that their teachings explain that Christian prayers and traditional way of dealing with witchcraft work hand in hand. For the African Independent Churches, consulting witch doctors is not evil, but is it another way of dealing with issues of witchcraft beliefs and practices. In this respect, Njozana pointed out that African independent churches aimed at meeting religious pastoral need of the local people, neglected by missionary instituted churches. Njozana further explained that African independent churches were formed in order to cater for Africans' desires and to provide them with relevant pastoral care. In this respect, these churches command the large following of Africans because the community think that they are addressing real and pertinent issues that affect them. This has to the exodus of members from missionary churches to African independent churches. African independent churches have responded pastorally by providing pastoral care support of allowing them to consult witch doctors to the people in their struggle against witchcraft and other fears within the community. These churches have translated ways of dealing with witchcraft belief and practices from African traditional religious perspective into the church setup. African independent churches have responded pastorally on the issue related to witchcraft belief and practice by mixing Christianity and African traditional religion, which can be viewed as religious syncretism. In times of crisis, African independent churches pray for the victim and also use some traditional method of eradicating witchcraft, such as sprinkling, purification, ointment, or swallowing concoction that cure various diseases related to witchcraft. They also conduct an exorcism to members who have come openly to say that they are practicing witchcraft in their society. They also use concussion to stop witches from causing harm and visiting the houses of their members. The pastoral challenges. The church in northern part of Malawi is facing several pastoral challenges in the process of dealing with witchcraft beliefs and practices, such as the first pastoral challenge is whether or not the church should endorse the presence of spiritual forces ascribed to the reality and unreality of witchcraft. Secondly, should the church minister, organize, instill, and support pastoral counseling or an exorcism to deal with the issues of witchcraft which have affected the church internally and externally? Thirdly, whether the church should deny, remain silent, ignore about the presence of witchcraft beliefs and practices, and to pastorally respond to problems caused by the phenomenon. The denial leads to denying people their human rights, while a focus on demonology would lead to killing, mistreating, and destroying lives and properties of innocent people in the community, such as killing people with albinism and those who have been accused of witchcraft. The church in northern Malawi, indeed in all of Malawi and Africa as a whole, should not focus on the reality and existence or unreality and existence of witchcraft beliefs and practices. The church should set aside theoretical debates of the existence and inexistence of witchcraft in order to concentrate on the lived experience of those who are influenced and affected by witchcraft beliefs and practices. This can be done by formulating biblical teaching that would change people's mindsets, perspective, and worldview on how they apprehend witchcraft beliefs and practices. Thank you very much. This makes the end of my presentation.